My daughter-in-law's words sliced through the morning air like shards of glass, piercing my chest with surgical precision. Her once respectful eyes now gleamed with the purest contempt I'd ever witnessed. The door slammed shut, the echo reverberating down the empty hallway. I stood there, clutching my purse with trembling hands, the weight of 60-odd years settling on me in a moment of utter humiliation. My casual lab coat, the one I wore without a second thought, felt like cracked armor. But I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I simply took a deep breath, straightened my posture, and descended the stairs with the dignity of someone carrying a story no one there fully understood. As my feet touched each step of the building I once called home, I felt the sting of her disdain, but also the strange lightness of someone who knows their true identity transcends the confines of that apartment. The gray Saturday morning stretched over the city like a heavy shroud, but I walked with firm steps, remembering who I truly was. Not just a single mother who raised her son while working in the city's renowned restaurants, but a woman who built her own fortress with calloused hands and a heart tempered by life's hardships. 25 years ago, when my world first crumbled, I was only 40, with a young son in my arms. His father had left without looking back, leaving me with bills to pay and dreams to rewrite. I remember the first night I cried silently in the kitchen while my little boy, "Mom, I don't want to leave you," he said the night before he left. "My love, life is like a complex dish. Each ingredient has its moment to be added. Now is your time to grow, to learn, to become the man I know you can be," I replied, holding his hands as I had done with so many young people in the kitchen. The years that followed were filled with quiet sacrifices. I worked even harder to pay for his college, sent him extra money so he wouldn't want for anything, covered for him when he called asking for help. But I did it all with love, with the certainty that I was investing in my son's future. It was during this period that I also started working at a small bistro in the countryside, keeping my identity a secret. I didn't use my real name. I was known only as the chef by the staff. That place became my refuge, where I could experiment with new recipes, train young talent, and simply do what I loved most, cook. Marlon had become the manager of that bistro, and our professional partnership strengthened over the years. He respected me not only as a mentor, but as the woman who had believed in him when no one else did. Together, we created a unique menu, a combination of sophistication and simplicity that attracted customers from all over the region. When my son graduated and returned to the city, I was at the peak of my career. I had become a reference in local gastronomy, my reputation extended beyond the city limits, and I was sure my son would be proud of the woman his mother had become. That's when he introduced me to his girlfriend, who soon became his wife. A young, beautiful, seemingly sweet woman who greeted me with smiles and kind words. I was so happy for my son's happiness that I didn't pay attention to the signs that, in retrospect, were obvious. At first, she seemed to admire my independence and my career. She asked questions about my journey, asked for recipes, pretended interest in my projects. But gradually, her true colors began to show. Subtle comments about my age, about how I should think about retiring, about how my constant presence in my son's life could be harmful to their marriage. If you're feeling the same outrage I felt when I noticed these changes, keep following this story. There are people who cross our paths only to teach us valuable lessons about our own strength, and sometimes the most difficult situations reveal who we really are. My son, blinded by love, didn't notice the subtle changes in his wife's behavior, or maybe he didn't want to notice. He visited me less, called less often, and when we were together, she always found a way to interrupt our conversation or to steer it towards subjects that included her. The first major humiliation came during a family dinner. I had prepared a special meal using some of my most cherished recipes. She barely touched the food, commenting on being watching her diet and suggesting that simpler dishes would be more appropriate. My son, to my surprise, agreed with her. "Mom, maybe you could make something lighter next time," he said, without realizing how his words hit me. I swallowed the pain and smiled, as I had learned to do during all those years of struggle. But something inside me began to break at that moment. The food I prepared wasn't just food, it was love made real. It was my way of caring for the people I loved. The situations became more frequent and more painful. She started questioning my advice, diminishing my achievements, insinuating that I was a meddling mother-in-law who didn't know how to respect boundaries. My son, increasingly influenced by her, began to distance himself from me. The worst part was that I saw my son transforming into someone I didn't recognize. The boy who grew up admiring my strength and determination was becoming a man who seemed ashamed of his own mother. He stopped talking about my career with pride, stopped including me in his important decisions, stopped seeing me as the strong woman who had raised him. For months, I tried to keep the peace, swallowing humiliations in silence, pretending I didn't notice the changes. My heart had been cracking slowly, like a porcelain plate developing hairline fractures until it shattered completely. That great Saturday morning was the final straw. I'd arrived at their apartment with some new recipes I wanted to share, little culinary gifts I'd lovingly prepared. But she greeted me with a chilling coldness, and when I tried to enter, she exploded. "Enough! I can't take it anymore! Don't you realize you're not welcome here?" she screamed, with a rage that seemed months in the making. I began, but she cut me off. "You just wanted what? To continue meddling in our lives? To keep treating my husband like a child? Get out of here, you busybody! Go eat on the street!" My son was in his room, pretending not to hear, or perhaps not caring enough to intervene. That was the most painful moment, realizing the man I had raised with so much love was allowing his wife to humiliate me like that. But it was in that moment of extreme pain that something inside me awoke, a strength I didn't know I still possessed, a dignity no one could take from me. I wasn't just a rejected mother-in-law. I was a woman who had built an extraordinary life with her own hands. As I walked the rain-swept streets that morning, instinctively heading towards the small bistro where I was respected and valued, I felt a clarity of mind I hadn't experienced in months. Each step I took reconnected me with my true identity, with the woman I had become through years of struggle and dedication. The bistro was nearly empty when I arrived, the sidewalk tables wet from the light rain, falling like tears from the gray sky. But I wasn't looking for a place to hide. I was looking for my kingdom, the place where I was truly valued. As I sat under the faded awning and opened the simple menu, I felt like I was coming home after a long journey. That place represented everything I had built: simplicity with quality, authenticity without pretense, love transformed into flavor. Marlon appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, his apron stained with chocolate and a genuine smile on his face. This man I had molded with my own hands looked at me with the admiration my own son had lost. He approached the table, wiping his hands on his apron, with the respect of someone who recognizes the presence of a master. "Chef, are you all right?" he asked, noticing something different in my expression. "I am, Marlon. I'm discovering who I really am," I replied, feeling a whirlwind of emotions wash over me. He personally served me the dish I always ordered, tilapia fillet with mashed potatoes and Sicilian lemon sauce. But it wasn't just a dish. It was a work of art, created with techniques I had taught, seasoned with affection I had inspired, presented with pride I had cultivated. When I tasted the first bite, I felt not only the perfect flavor, but the power of someone who controls the alchemy of ingredients. In that instant, my emotional wounds began to heal. Here was my true kingdom, a small kitchen where my hands dictated orders and my name was never questioned. Marlon returned after a few minutes, bringing a small dessert I hadn't ordered, his new passion fruit dessert, prepared with the recipe I had taught him years ago. It was more than a dessert. It was a tribute, an acknowledgement, a way of honoring me in the most sublime way possible. Chef, I want you to know that everything I am today I owe to you, he said, with a sincerity that contrasted brutally with the treatment I had received that morning. I closed my eyes and felt a decision forming within me. That humiliation would end. Returning home would mean facing the icy silence of the hallway and the disdainful look of the one who had expelled me. Even though my heart ached with longing for my beloved son, I understood that I couldn't stay where I wasn't valued. Marlon, have you ever thought about expanding our horizons? I asked, with a determination I hadn't felt in months. What do you mean, Chef? A food truck. Our authentic recipes traversing the city streets, bringing lightness and flavor to those who, like me, have felt the bitterness of indifference, I replied, feeling my creative energy awaken again. Marlon's eyes lit up with an animation I hadn't seen in a long time. We began to talk about the project, about the possibilities, about how we could bring our passion for cooking to even more people. It was exciting to see how an idea born of pain could transform into something so positive and promising. Chef, there's something I need to tell you, Marlon said with a mysterious expression. The people from the organic fair want to meet you. They said that whoever taught Marlon deserves something bigger. My heart quickened. The organic fair was the most prestigious gastronomic event in the region, where only the best professionals had the opportunity to participate. I introduced you as the master because of your wisdom and the way you transform lives through food, he continued. They want to offer you a permanent space at the fair. I smiled genuinely for the first time that day. It was comforting to be recognized for my competence, my talent, everything I had built over the years. That recognition didn't come from blood ties or family obligations. It came from genuine respect for my work and my ability. When I said goodbye to Marlon and left the bistro, the rain had stopped, but my heart still beat fast with hope. I walked the city streets with renewed energy, feeling like a phoenix that had just been reborn from its ashes. I arrived home late in the afternoon, determined to confront the situation head on. I wouldn't return as the humiliated woman who had left that morning. I would return as the executive chef, the respected mentor, the woman who had built an extraordinary career with her own hands. When I opened the apartment door, I found my son alone in the living room with an expression of guilt he couldn't hide. He looked at me with the eyes of a boy who knows he's done something wrong but doesn't have the courage to admit it. "Mom, where have you been?" he asked, in a voice that tried to sound casual but betrayed his worry. "I was in my other world, son, the world where I'm respected for who I am, not tolerated out of obligation," I replied, with a calmness that surprised him. I told him about my afternoon at the bistro, about the food truck project, about the organic farmers market proposal. I saw his eyes widen in surprise and perhaps renewed pride. He didn't know about my parallel professional life, about the young people I had trained, about the respect I had earned in that small world of gastronomy. "Mom, I didn't know," he began to say, but his wife appeared in the doorway of the bedroom. "Oh, you're back," she said, in a tone that mixed sarcasm and discomfort. That's when I made the most important decision of my life. I looked at her with the same dignity with which I faced a packed kitchen on a busy night and said, "Yes, I'm back, but not to beg for acceptance or to apologize for being who I am. I'm back so you know exactly who you're dealing with." I told my complete story, from the early days of struggle to the most recent accolades. I talked about the restaurants where I worked, about the young people I trained, about the recipes I created, about the reputation I built. I saw my daughter-in-law's expression gradually change from disdain to surprise to something that might have been respect. "You have two choices," I continued, addressing her with the authority of someone accustomed to leading. "You can respect me for who I am and what I've achieved, or you can continue treating me as if I were a burden in your life. But know that I will not tolerate any more humiliation." My son was silent, processing the information he had just received. His wife, clearly uncomfortable, mumbled something about not knowing the importance of my career. "It's not about importance or lack thereof," I replied. "It's about respect. Respect for the woman who raised your husband. Respect for the professional who dedicated her life to an art. Respect for the human being who deserves dignity regardless of anything else." In the days that followed, our family dynamic changed completely. My son began to show again the pride he felt for me, telling his friends about my career, including me in his important conversations. His wife, though still reserved, began to treat me with a respectful courtesy that hadn't existed before. But the biggest change happened in me. I had rediscovered my own strength, my ability to resist and to be reborn. The food truck project became a reality, and together with Marlon, we created a business that quickly became a landmark in the city. Our truck, christened the Master's Flavors, traveled the streets bringing not only food, but stories, love, and hope. The organic farmers market proposal came to fruition, and my space there became one of the most sought after. People came from far and wide to taste my creations, to hear my stories, to learn from my experience. I had become not just a chef, but a respected figure in the gastronomic community. Months later, on a Sunday afternoon, I received an unexpected visit. It was my daughter-in-law, alone, with an expression that mixed humility and determination. "I'd like to learn," she said, without beating around the bush. "I'd like to learn to cook with you." I looked at her for a long moment, seeing no longer the woman who had humiliated me, but someone who was trying to build bridges where there had once been only walls. "Cooking isn't just about recipes," I replied. "It's about patience, about respect, about understanding that each ingredient has its value and its moment. Are you willing to learn that?" She nodded, and I saw in her eyes a sincerity I hadn't noticed before. We started slowly, with simple recipes, but full of meaning. I taught her not only techniques, but culinary philosophy. I showed her how food can be a form of communication, of care, of love. During these lessons, I discovered that my daughter-in-law carried her own insecurities. She had felt threatened by my presence, not out of malice, but out of fear, of not being enough, of not being able to occupy the place she felt was rightfully hers. Her aggressiveness had been, in fact, a desperate way of protecting what she considered her territory. Understanding this didn't justify the treatment I had received, but it allowed me to see her as a complex human being with her own struggles and fears. Gradually, we built a relationship based on mutual respect and the understanding that we both had an important place in the life of the man we loved. Today, when I look back, I see that gray Saturday morning not as the day of my humiliation, but as the day of my liberation. It took being rejected to rediscover my own worth. It took being kicked out of my own home to find my true home. It took hearing that I wasn't welcome to realize where I truly belonged. I learned that being the boss isn't defined by blood ties or family obligations, but by the ability to lead, inspire, and transform lives. I learned that dignity isn't something others give or take away. It's something we carry within ourselves, regardless of how we're treated. My story isn't just about overcoming. It's not just about forgiveness. It's about self-worth. It's not just about family. It's about identity. Every woman who's ever felt diminished, every person who's ever been underestimated, every human being who's ever questioned their own worth can find in this story a reflection of their own capacity to be reborn. The food truck continues to roll through the city streets, bringing flavors and stories to those who need a little hope. My space at the farmer's market has become a meeting place for people seeking not only good food, but inspiration. And my family, rebuilt on a stronger foundation of respect and understanding, has become an example of how relationships can be healed when there's a willingness on both sides. Because ultimately, we all deserve to be treated with dignity. We all have the right to be respected for who we are and what we've achieved. And we all have the capacity to be reborn, no matter how many times life knocks us down. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover you already had so much more than you imagined. The recipe for dignity isn't found in any cookbook, but it's the most important seasoning we can add to our lives. And once you learn to use it, nothing tastes the same.